Welcome to the Spawn Chunks. This is episode number 372, recorded on Monday, October 20th, and this is a podcast all about Minecraft. You can find it on your favorite podcasting app. The video version is available on YouTube as well as Spotify. If you like listening to the show, then please subscribe wherever you are downloading this. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is a vibrant Pixel Riffs, or you may know him as Johnny, because in real life, he looks like this.
Yes, I don't look like this very often, and vibrant is certainly one way of describing this. We've been describing it in all sorts of other ways in the render distance. That's the extended version of the podcast. We've kind of gone on a bit of a fashion angle this time around, but if you're interested in getting a little bit more podcast every week from us, you can go to patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers there gets you about 15 to 30 minutes of extra podcast every week. That's what we call the render distance. You can also watch the show live when we record it in Discord. You can join our monthly hangouts where we get to share what you've been up to in Minecraft over the last month. And we even have quarterly hangouts where we go into the behind the scenes facts and figures of the podcast. One of those should be coming up pretty soon. So keep your eyes peeled for all of the announcements happening in the Discord if you sign up over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
This week on the show, we have refinements to the Mounts of Mayhem drop in a new snapshot and lunge into the mailbag in the chunk mail dispenser this week on the show.
Yes, so before that, of course, we've got to do our quick login and talk about what's new in our Minecraft lives. So let's kick off with you. What's new on the Citadel?
Well, I started off the week with good intentions. I had gone to grab some beacons and increase my mining capability on the Mushroom Island because I discovered that the creeper farm was a little bit too far away, was not loading in all the time. I also needed to dig around and find other lush caves because the lush cave network underneath the island is extensive. And so as mobs were spawning in the caves that were near me, less creepers were spawning in the farm. So I had to do some digging and lighting up. Something I thought I was going to be able to avoid in a Mushroom Island. But of course, now that we've got the vertical biomes with dripstone caves and lush caves, you kind of have to go in and look for stuff. Now, the good news is that I did find some lush caves and light them up, and that I also found some large enough caves that I could also put some small farms like directly underneath the center of the island. The idea was that I wasn't sure if I wanted to start building a lot of really heavy infrastructure at the center if I wasn't going to stay there, like if it wasn't worth it in terms of the spawn rates, etc. And I think I'm going to stay despite that because I just really like being in the center of the island. I could build my main area over the lush cave and have this giant space always loaded in, but it's way up in the northwest, so it feels kind of unbalanced to start there, and that's just a me thing. So anyway, I decided to start digging down in 30 block increments and then digging like a big X underneath the main area just to kind of see what I ran into. And I ran into death, and I had the first substantial death on the server in probably 5 or 6 years, where I lost absolutely everything, including the netherite gear that I had on.
Oh no.
Yeah, so somebody in the chat's like, well, at least your netherite gear didn't, die in the lava. It's like, oh yeah, fair. But we couldn't find it anywhere. So even if it didn't die, it's floating somewhere under a block and you can't see it, and so it all disappeared. Now, kind of a cheese off on stream because I had other things I wanted to do. But hindsight, it took an hour to get back up to speed. I had a spare netherite pick. I had a spare netherite shovel, I think. I didn't have a netherite axe, but like I'm not chopping a lot of wood right now, so it's not a big deal. But I had like endgame diamond axe. So like it's not, the durability is different, but like other than that, there's really not a huge difference. And the biggest thing was an elytra. That's the only elytra I had was on me. And so that went. And again, not really flying around that much on the island right now, so it wasn't a huge deal. But servermate Cosmic went out to the end islands and grabbed an elytra and dropped it off for me. So between having a very established endgame server that's 8 years old and having server mates that are really generous with their time and items in the game, I'm back up to speed in no time. So it was more embarrassing than it was anything else. It was basically mining around, digging holes for beacons with other beacons powering you. So even though I was technically being careful, I just went through the side of a hole, and then lava came in, and I was just unable to put blocks down fast enough. I don't really enjoy the mechanic of lava in Minecraft. Like I feel like it's just kind of like one and done. I find it very difficult to survive that kind of stuff. And speaking of, I did update the server to 1.21.10 now. And so the next thing was, seeing as we didn't have Elytra and I was kind of changing and getting geared up, I thought, okay, well, let's use that as an excuse to go to the Nether and grab a dried ghast, because I hadn't gone to the Nether underneath the island because it's all going to be new chunks. And so I wanted to make sure that I was in the latest update before I loaded in new Nether.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Nether tried to kill us immediately. So I walked through the portal and I was up against a giant sheer wall of netherrack in a nether wastes. There was only one block of space between me and the wall. And in the wall are those little single ports of lava, like the single things.
Yeah.
And they just started to run down. And I get out of the way immediately, thankfully. But it was just kind of like, wow, like if this was your first experience in Minecraft and you didn't know what to expect, you didn't know to have your head on a swivel. Because I was thinking like, where am I? Is there a ghast nearby? Like, what do I have to do to kind of protect this portal? And immediately had to jump up on blocks and block some lava. And it's like, man, if this was your first experience in the Nether in Minecraft, like you would have been roasted immediately and lost everything. Done. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it was a brutal start. But the happy ghast, or the dried ghast, I should say, was not far away. Managed to grab that, have that set up, tested it out, hate it. Will not be using a happy ghast at all unless I can get a data pack or something that changes the button for flying, like shift to fly down. Like I jumped off of this thing more times than I can count. Even just thinking, okay, you got to shift your brain, Joel. It's different mechanics. Point down to fly down. It's painfully slow. Every other game I play that has any kind of hovering or flying capability, including creative mode in Minecraft, you hit shift to go down. And I'm just like, nope, I'm not interested in the happy ghast whatsoever. I tried flying around the shulker shell farm and like making some adjustments, and like I am going to be faster to just use scaffolding and pillar up and decorate stuff that way. So unless I can find something that tweaks the way that they control, then I'm probably not going to use them. The other thing about them that I will definitely be doing, because I did make one, so I have a happy ghast just sitting around. I'm not going to kill it. I need to mute it somehow. So Donaraf that wrote in a couple of episodes ago with that mod that mutes very specific things in the game, I'm probably going to download and install that, because I cannot wait to shut this happy ghast up. The range at which you can hear it is ridiculous, because here I am mining underneath the Mushroom Island and I can hear ghasts, and my brain's like, I'm not in the Nether. Why am I hearing? Oh, right. There's a happy ghast like up there above me. So that was a bit of a problem. But the good news, tunneling underneath the Nether and all that kind of stuff, we had, not the Nether, sorry, tunneling underneath the Mushroom Island, I ran into a number of geodes, several lush caves that I mentioned that I can light up, and I ran into a giant trial chamber. So I was able to jump into one of those. I didn't really do much with it. Like I didn't try the trial key, and I just kind of used the blocks to block the spawners. But it means that I have a really large source of waxed copper, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's always the bonus of finding a trial chamber, is that, like, especially if you're not somebody who wants to go through the hassle of aging all of the copper and whatnot, it makes a lot of sense to have that. But yeah, what an unfortunate turn of events. Like it's such a shame that you ended up having two really negative encounters with lava. Like obviously the Nether one wasn't too bad because you have the experience of it, but I totally agree. Like it's so easy to end up in a situation like when your portal spawns over a lava lake because there isn't enough valid terrain nearby, and like two people who, like, those unfortunate circumstances happen, the Nether just forever brands itself as the dimension that kills you, and it takes forever to like get away from that, which is a real shame. And shame that the happy ghast didn't work out for you as well. But yeah, I definitely see how it's trying to override probably like a decade or more of muscle memory of this kind of control being in games, and I did see it as kind of the potential stumbling block for a lot of people when it comes to the happy ghast, is just a couple of issues with the controls, and when you're using it in survival, of course, pressing shift and then still holding forward means you walk off it within a couple of steps, and so it kind of becomes like the new scaffolding, where just when everybody gets used to having something that helps you build from height, another solution comes along and you have to get used to controlling that as well.
Yeah, I'm not the. I'll give it another go if I can. Like I feel like there's going to be a better situation. Like if I'm decorating a ceiling of a really large room or cave,
Yeah.
that's probably going to be more convenient than anything else. But I feel like if there's something that I'm doing where there's a lot of adjusting, like if I have to adjust the height, if I'm at a single height, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if I have to adjust the height frequently, I can't see it being a good experience. And I think the other thing too is this, like, having gone from using Elytra all the time to using the happy gas, like, I mean, it's slow. If you
Hmm.
compare a happy gas to walking on the ground, it's not that bad, right? Like you're flying, you have no obstacles, you can move mobs around. Like there's a lot of things that I think would be good for it. But I don't see me using it as a building situation. Even the large geo that I dug out, like um I didn't use a ghast for it. I just started at the top and worked my way to the bottom, and
Hmm.
anything else that I needed to go up, I just used some scaffolding. The geode is actually going to be an amethyst farm. It's not going to be perfect. Like I'm just going to use pistons to knock them off every 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. And I'm not going to be able to knock all of them off. I'm not worried about that because it's just for me, so it doesn't have to have like this high output.
Hmm.
But I created the water collection and the water transport temporarily to the surface. So at some point when I get this thing working, I will never have to go back down to it. I can just kind of collect the amethyst. I did a little bit of decorating. Like I couldn't figure out what to do with the floor, so I just made it all ice because it looked good next to the purple. I used purple pillars because they sort of have a sci-fi look to them, and I just kind of made a frame around it. Honestly, I just want to make sure that if I'm digging around, I don't dig into it and do anything, with a high utility pickaxe. Like I don't want to break any of the budding amethyst by mistake.
Yeah.
So right now, there's no clock. There's a proof of concept redstone ladder and stuff that pushes out the pistons. So I can do it fairly simply. I just have to have all those little redstone wires kind of like connecting all the different places. So, and I'm probably just going to use purple slabs for the redstone just to kind of have it look cool. There's no need to encase it in glass. It's not really on display. So I'm just going to try and make it look like some sort of mining facility or something. I don't know how much work I'm going to be doing under the sci-fi island. Like I kind of want to work on the surface more than I want to build in the caves. So the caves are going to be more like things that have to go down there. So the geode, obviously, you can't move. Mob farms, you can't have anything on the surface because they won't spawn. So the only things that are going to be under the surface of the Mushroom Island are going to be things like farms and essential things. Now, that said, I do think after digging those tunnels, it will be kind of fun to add some sort of underground transportation to make it fast to get to these places for no other reason other than just a fun excuse to build some decorated tunnels. Like I think that could be kind of fun. Make them like right now they're 1x2 tunnels that I got to run down. It would be fun to make them 5x5 or 7x7, something I can fly down, which would be kind of fun to have those visuals go by on stream and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I am. There's a lot of infrastructure going in on the Mushroom Island, a lot of digging around, figuring out what resources I have a lot of, what I don't have a lot of, what I might need to make more of, that kind of thing. So it's getting there. I don't really have much for inspiration for builds yet, but again, I think a lot of that is just still really making sure that I'm in the right position or location physically on the island before I start building anything. That's going to be a lot of time involved.
Yeah. Wait for inspiration to strike, and that way you can
Mm.
sort of commit wholeheartedly instead of sort of half doing some stuff.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the amethyst farm concept as well. Like, I think I want to revisit amethyst farms now that chunk loading has become so much more of like a codified and expected mechanic for technical players, because obviously it was a thing before. People used nether portals for it a lot, but now that it's so easy with ender pearl bubble columns, and redstone ticks can still happen very easily in chunk loaded spaces, I think it's going to make more sense to have a piston powered amethyst farm, despite the fact that it has a lower yield than like a fortune pickaxe would. I think it's going to
Yeah.
make sense for it to be constantly loaded and have stuff running in the background that way, which is what makes me a little sad that I have committed so fully to absolutely destroying a geode in what I've been doing in the Minecraft Survival Guide, which is still digging out a giant area. I'm now down to Y2. The target is Y0, at which point the entire floor becomes deep slate, and it would be a real pain to mine out. It's certainly quite painful right now, but I'm getting there. And I could use moss for it, but I want to keep the blocks, so I decided I would at least get this area dug out manually and then maybe consider other digging methods for the rest of the area, because this is not the full area. We need a lot more space in here to build the full copper aging facility that I designed in creative ages ago and have still never built in survival. With that said, I am probably going to start building one quadrant of it, because it's a design that I came up with that now, with 1/4 of it built, you can just kind of flip it horizontally, just sort of mirror the entire design, and then mirror that on the other axis, and you end up with basically 4 quarters all doing the same thing. And then build it up from the ground up so that there are multiple layers of the farm as well. So I could build one corner of this thing, and it would still be perfectly functional as a copper aging machine, and then once I have the rest of the space, I can add the remainder of what I need to build mechanism-wise. So I think that will get me aging copper beforehand. It'll give me a chance to, like, I think still introduce the machine while the copper age is relevant, while it's still kind of the active update. And it will also give me time to think about how I'm going to acquire components to build the other 3 quadrants, because the scale of redstone, not just the dust and blocks and stuff required, but also piston crafting, comparators and repeaters, all of the components that are required need some redstone investment, and there's a pretty sizable commitment going into this already. So far, I have just traded with clerics to get most of the redstone, and I will probably look into building a witch farm fairly soon, but I need to revise how those mechanics work now, because the last time I built one was probably in 1.14, which is a shifting floor witch farm that doesn't work anymore because you can't glitch the witches down through a soul sand block with a solid block being pushed into the same space, which I think is the mechanic I relied upon before. So, there's a few little kind of bits and pieces to figure out while I'm on the road to making this larger copper aging machine.
Someone asked me on stream this past week if my witch farm still worked, and the answer I've just realized is yes, because it's a water timing thing. It's not a shifting floor.
Just a flushing one, yeah.
Yeah, just a flushing one. So yeah, it'll still work. I mean, the difference is that I'm just never in the area. So like I'm trying to find farms where I don't have to AFK at them. Like I want them to kind of work in the background. So that's what I'm hoping to do on the island. So that's cool that you've got the dig almost done for the big copper machine. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that will look like from a lore perspective, like how you're going to showcase it, because I always find these kind of super large redstone devices or farms, they look like circuit boards, they look like computers, and it's just such a neat idea to like see the inside, see the guts. It's like the clear back on the iMacs when they first came out. Like that kind of stuff is just such a fun thing to see, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and stylize it a little bit from the version I have built in Creative, which is all made out of like wood and terracotta and just like a few things that felt like solid materials that I can keep an eye on where the circuits are going and like which bits are feeding into what, but then also have something that looks a little bit like it's not too garish. I'm not building the entire thing out of like different types of glazed terracotta or what have you, but we'll see what I can manage this time around as far as the aesthetics go. But yeah, that's been the main thing on my mind at the moment. I did a little bit of testing and I found out that unfortunately I won't be able to age any of the newer copper components, mainly because it requires whatever's loaded into the machine to be a block that can conduct redstone power. So like the copper blocks going into the machine get detected by observers, also conduct the power from a redstone torch, which like locks the circuit in place until the block is done aging, and then a different part of the circuit activates. And yeah, this doesn't work for things like lightning rods. It certainly doesn't work for trapdoors and things that when they receive a redstone signal, they would change state, but not necessarily because they're aging. And doors wouldn't fit in there at all because they they're 2 blocks tall, so it wouldn't be able to fit into the space I have designed for them either. So I'm considering either reworking and coming up with a new design for the pushable stuff, like lightning rods, and there's a few other blocks in there that could be pushable to try and space things out without the component that requires the block to be powered. But it may just be the case that I build a big grid on the floor somewhere with markers, like a specific material that shows, hey, put the copper thing here.
Right.
It might even be like a design that I've seen other people use where you just have a big pad of oxidized copper and you space things out and encourage stuff to age in a smaller area, just so you have like a bit more of the assisted copper aging mechanic without it being full speed. But I figure the most important thing is that I have a way to age blocks, because the blocks are what's going to be the majority of those builds. I'm not planning on building something with more than a stack of copper lightning rods. That doesn't seem all that likely. And so occasionally there'll be some other blocks that I want to throw in there, but I expect some of that stuff can either be aged on its own, or I can find a way of aging it on a smaller scale than I want to do with the big copper facility.
You could maybe even make something up, like using the copper lightning rods as the base of a small plant.
Yeah.
Like using a leaf block on the top and just using a bunch of copper lightning rods as the base of it, as the trunk. And then as it ages, just kind of go into your little plantation and like harvest the trunks and then replace them with the raw copper again. And so aesthetically, it's just going to look like a little garden, but it's really like your copper lightning farm,
Yeah.
or lightning rod farm.
There's a lot of decorative ways you could get started with that stuff. And so, yeah, I think there's a few different options to explore. I like the mechanical side of things, but I can see how having an aesthetic thing, especially if it's on the surface, could really contribute to the vibe of the area I'm building. So I'll consider that. I'll give that a try.
Moving into the news, the new snapshot this week is Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 25W42A. Changes this week: underwater biome fog color and fog distance is now blended based on the player's position between biomes, similar to regular biome fog and sky colors. The O Shiny advancement for distracting a piglin with gold items has been updated to include the golden spear and the golden nautilus armor. Zombie horses can be leashed when their mob jockey is removed. The Nautilus and Zombie Nautilus can now be controlled while on land, and mending is no longer incompatible with the lunge enchantment. Some technical changes in 25W42A. The data pack version is now 90. The resource pack version is now 70.1. There are some updates to server management protocol to enable authentication from web browsers. The data pack changes have some minor tweaks to the structure of the stopwatch command, and a new environmental attribute system provides a data-driven way to control a variety of visual and gameplay systems. Each environmental attribute controls a specific visual or gameplay effect. For example, Minecraft Visual Sky Color controls the color of the sky, and Minecraft Gameplay Water Evaporates controls whether water can be placed in a given location. A note from the developers: this system and many of the introduced attributes should be considered very experimental and may still change significantly in the coming snapshots and releases. There is a lot more information about the environmental attributes in the changelog this week, so if you're interested, we'll have a link in this week's show notes. Some bug fixes to note in 25W42A. Zombie horses and zombie nautiluses cannot be spawned in peaceful difficulty. Spears with fire aspect can ignite victims even when the attacks are blocked. Spears can jab through walls. Nautiluses and zombie nautiluses never despawn. Lightning strikes waxed lightning rods do not deoxidize nearby unwaxed copper blocks. Skeleton horses burn in the sunlight. That has been fixed. As always, the full list of bugs can be found in the Minecraft.net changelog, linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
Well, I, for one, am quite happy that lunge and mending are compatible now, but I'm honestly surprised that the durability cost of lunge wasn't one of the first things that was on the chopping block, because that still feels like the real problem here. Like, I think as we were discussing last week, the main use of lunge is going to be for stuff like parkour courses, in my estimation. I don't see people using it for PvP all that much in the broad range of people who are going to use it. And I think mending tools mid-parkour course feels kind of impractical to me. I know it's possible to do it, and it could maybe add to the sort of risk-reward of the course, but stopping to splash yourself with bottles of enchanting or whatever feels like it's going to slow down the entire experience of like the parkour element. Compatibility with mending feels like an easy thing for them to toggle while they're still, I assume, gathering feedback about the durability cost, but it's kind of strange that wasn't addressed in this snapshot, especially coming so soon after the sort of community outcry about that, because I've seen a lot of people basically making the same points we did last week.
Yeah, I saw the same. Most people had that opinion of the lunge costing too much, which I agree with. Like, I mean, I even as someone that's probably not going to use it, I still think like that makes me even less interested to test it out. It doesn't seem to have the same outside use case benefits that the Trident does. Like, I think that's the thing right now with the spear, is that the Trident, you could sort of see like different use cases. You could see it being used in like Cubfan 135 did Trident golf, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just don't see the spear being that useful with it being so fragile. I think if you want to create some outside the box gameplay for people, you have to make it a little bit more durable. And I am still holding my breath for being able to use a spear in a dispenser.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really fun way to add some utility to it for the people that are maybe not interested in PvP or even PvE with it. Because right now it still feels kind of slow and wonky, and I just the whole charging things up bit with it. And I've said a number of times on the show that like melee in a first-person game, especially one as blocky as Minecraft, it's not really the most intuitive, at least not for me. And so I'm looking for other ways that the spear could be used beyond just like decorating with it, which is kind of where I'm sitting with it. So it does look really cool in game. Like I like the look of it, and so I'm hoping to not just be able to put it in an item frame. Like I want there to be a different way to display the spear, like in a dispenser or something like that in the game. I think that would be more fun and more useful for players.
Yeah, I still think it has a couple of like alternate functionalities that could be useful. Things like being able to hit multiple targets at once without the need for a sweeping edge enchantment. It could make that
right at a mob farm. Yeah,
it could be useful at mob farms. It could also, because you can attack from further away, it could be easier for players who have like mob farms that generate creepers, where if you get too close and you're in the creeper's eye line, attacking it and not dealing enough damage to kill it can often lead to it potentially exploding. And so standing a little further away with a spear and getting the same effect could be kind of useful. But again, this is all parallel functionality. It's not anything that's been newly added to the game. It's just an alternative to something we already have. So I think that's what I'm looking for from the spear, and lunge filled that niche to an extent, but is also it's kind of negligible whether it works better or worse than Riptide. What it does right now is snap a spear over your leg every time you use it, so it feels a little bit intense to still have 128 durability cost every time you use Lunge 3. With that said, I think there's still a lot of feedback out there in the ecosystem, and I expect Mojang will probably address these things in time. The other major thing in this snapshot for me is data-driven environment attributes. That seems like something that's been a long time coming, and we saw like little peaks of that and in the April Fool's voting update, where you could vote to change biome colors and leaf colors and sky colors in different biomes, but that would cycle through randomly, right? It was the kind of thing that you didn't have control over except when you were given control of it briefly and you got to say yes or no to something. And so I think the sort of data-driven aspect of it for players who are interested in making custom biomes, custom maps, that kind of thing, has some real potential, and I'm excited to see what people end up doing with it.
I think it also is a tool that could be used for people that may not like the biome color that happens with vibrant visuals, right? So if you really want to use vibrant visuals, you like the shadows, you like everything else, but you really don't like how yellow it makes savannas. Or for me, if it does end up being super purple, the sky in a mushroom island, right? If I decide that's not really what I want, then being able to control that with a data pack or something would be great. Or just if a resource pack, if you want the color to be different, just not that color, you want it turquoise instead of purple, whatever. That could be fun. I don't know if it's something that you could control with a precise amount of location data. So like if you wanted the color of the sky to be different when you're at an ocean monument versus if you're in the ocean next to the ocean monument, it might be biome specific.
Right, yeah.
But that would be cool. Like I'm just thinking like things like having the mansion be dark and foreboding, like have it always be cloudy, and always be creepy. Having something like a pillager outpost, or maybe have villages be more sunny. Like it could be kind of interesting to have different environmental attributes around the structures instead of just the biomes. But we'll have to see if that's something that's even possible. One thing that does make me a little concerned about this kind of stuff is that there are so many custom options now with environmental attributes being part of the game. It also kind of opens up the game for custom maps and stuff, which is great. But there are also things that I've also thought would be good in the game that now sometimes, and this is completely anecdotal, but a while ago I suggested something like a liquid in the nether would be really fun, like an ad to move items around, something like a slime, right? But now with these attributes, if you wanted to, you could make a data pack, I believe, where you could just allow water to be something that could be placed in the nether and it won't evaporate. And so you could just do it. You could just make a data pack and have water in the nether. And so does that remove motivation at Mojang to then make something else that would happen in the nether that would be liquid based, when they could just say, well, they get a data pack, they could just do it if they want, And again, I'm kind of pulling devil's advocate here because I don't really think that that's the attitude at Mojang, but where there's so many things that can be customized. With the discourse that I see online, this happened actually on my TikTok, where I was talking about copper hoppers and how cool it would be if in the copper age they added copper hoppers. And there was a bunch of people chiming in saying, oh, that'd be great. What if they were limited? What if they could push items up? Like that, people had all these ideas. But then there'd be these naysayers in the comment that would say like, well, we can just do that with droppers, or like I can just download this mod. It's like, well, we're not talking about modded Minecraft. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to just add a mod. We're talking about the vanilla game and what it would be cool if the intended experience was this, not the modded experience. Because everybody knows that if you want to play modded, you can get a mod for just about anything. The game is 15, 16 years old. People have been thinking about adding things to the game for as long as it's existed. So I see that argument in the gamer space for Minecraft. And so when stuff like this comes in, it's like, it's great to have all these options, and it's great for, like you said, custom maps and those custom experiences. But at the same time, like I hope it doesn't stifle the innovation that could happen with something like a liquid in the nether, or different updates that might happen to the end, or like some of the bigger sweeps that I think could improve the game and make it more fun to play.
Yeah, I think the way I see it, data packs are a way for them to support things that they don't necessarily plan to add to the vanilla game, but are still in demand by players, and removing the barrier to entry that mods sometimes are, because like learning to code a mod feels a lot more complex than learning to code a data pack. You have to work with whatever system is injecting the mod code into the game, so like your mod loader like Fabric or whatever. And so I think there's a nice middle ground with data packs where this is something that they don't plan to make it so that in the vanilla game you can turn the sky of a plains biome pink at will, but with data packs it's possible to do that if you want to make some kind of Candyland custom biome for yourself. So I think it's nice that they are considering making this more data driven and exposing that stuff to players, like making it, something that players have direct control over, rather than obfuscating it behind custom code and the sort of encrypted stuff. So I think it's neat to see changes like that happening, and maybe it hints at a development direction to an extent. But remember, these are also systems that make it easier for the developers to quickly sketch something up. If they want to consider a new biome, they can effectively rework an existing biome into it using some of these custom features, and it makes it a little bit more approachable than like coding it all from scratch, I suppose. That's mainly speculation. I don't know if that's specifically how the team works, but I can see it as one option if we're speculating about how they might want to add something in future.
We do have some speculation happening in the mailbag this week. So moving into chunk mail, if you'd like to email the show, send a message to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and if it helps, include whether or not you're a patron in the subject line. That does help us sort things out. And keeping them short helps us include more emails in the show. And Johnny has the first one.
Yes, lots of short and sweet emails this week. This one comes in from Dennis J, and the subject is mounts causing mayhem. Hey Pix and Joel, I thought of a great idea for the upcoming game drop, Mounts of Mayhem, which could solve a problem I hope I'm not alone in facing. I often find myself using horses for exploring in the early game, but as someone who isn't overly skilled at the game, if I die, I struggle to find my mount again. My idea is that if a mount has been name tagged, it should appear on the locator bar, which would give the locator bar a use in single player. Would love to hear your ideas on this. Dennis Jelly was lost in the woods with nothing but a copper ingot to hand.
I think it's a solid idea. I'm not sure how the system would handle a lot of mobs. We know that Minecraft players would test the limits of this if that was a possible thing. But I could see it being really useful for finding a mob, as Dennis mentioned. But also, you could just name tag a chicken and keep it in your base. And then you've got a compass location for like which direction your base is. Which again, for early game players or people that are new to the game, like it can be kind of disorienting sometimes in Minecraft. You start exploring and you kind of, oh, what's over that hill? What's over that hill? Oh crap, where's my home base? Where'd I leave that chest of stuff? Like which direction is that? And if you don't know the directions in Minecraft that well, then having the location bar being like, oh yeah, the horse that you tied up or the chicken that you tied up with a name tag, like you can just find it. How do you communicate to a player that happens? Good call. I don't know. But I do like the idea of using mobs that are name tagged as waypoints in the game.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that part of it, mainly because I think it sort of devalues other systems we have of marking waypoints. I think things like lodestone compasses become sort of fairly like irrelevant if you end up with like the locator bar being so convenient, being always there, and then having something that's always going to point you home. It sort of devalues the point. But I was considering as a solution to this already, if you're if Dennis is, you know, out there exploring, and I assume you're dying while dismounted, because typically when I've been using mounts, I find them more vulnerable than the player. So the horse I'm riding is usually dying before I am if we get into a scrape, right? Typically it's like I ride a horse into a ravine by accident or something like that. But if you're dismounting your horse, then going caving, and then you can go back to the cave you found to like pick up your stuff, but you don't know where you left your horse before that. I wonder if maybe bringing a lodestone and a compass with you, leaving that where the horse is tied up, and activating the compass before you go, and maybe bring it with you in like a bundle or something like that, so it's not taking up too much space. And then that way, at least, if you've been able to recover all of the stuff that you lost while caving when you died, you will at least have a lodestone compass that like returns you to where your horse was. So there are a couple of systems like this that you could use in game, but require a little bit of extra preparation. Lodestones are a lot cheaper now, so it's definitely worth getting them. They're you know, only an iron ingot now instead of a netherite ingot, so a little bit more of an early game technology. You can also find them in nether portals. But I think the waypoint idea and having it be on the locator bar is a cool one. I think if you're attached to one specific horse, I think if every name tag mob appeared on it, it would get a little bit chaotic, and also for people who are, let's say, like horse enthusiasts who wanted to come up with names for all of their horses in their herd, you're sort of left with 30 horses on a locator bar, most of which are probably going to be in the same place if you're traveling a bit further away. But you're kind of like, you know, here is, you know, Daisy and Mabel and Vera and whatever else you're naming your horses, and it's like they're all just kind of there, and you kind of go, which one is it that I need to go back and find? If you wanted to name your entire herd, and even if you're like breeding horses even, and you wanted to keep track of like, this one's the fast one, this one's the highest jumping one, and you're trying to breed for certain characteristics, like name tagging those can really help. But then if they're all kind of piling up on your locator bar, I think it becomes a problem. I think the solution is a new item, and I think it would be nice if you had something, maybe if you combined a name tag and a compass together, you would end up with some sort of geotag. It's going a little bit like there's a system in Terraria that has a lot of different, like there's a compass and there's like a depth meter and things like that. You sort of combine those over the course of the game into like a single device that eventually just becomes a smartphone. But it's basically lets you combine all of these systems so that you don't have like a ton of items taking up your inventory, just so you can see where you are in the world and keep track of like stuff like that. And I think it'd be fun to have a very stripped down version of that in Minecraft that sort of becomes like the key rings that let you find your keys if you've lost them using an app on your phone, right? It could be something where you have a specific item like a name tag that allows you to tag a mob for the locator bar specifically. And you separate out the functionality, that way you don't end up with too much crossover with if you want to name tag like a zombie so it doesn't despawn or something. You don't need to find where that zombie is all the time because it's probably in your iron farm or wherever, right? So yeah, I think there's merit to the idea, certainly. I think the execution is something that needs a little bit of work, but I do think it'd be a neat thing to have in the game, especially for those of us who like to explore using mounts.
There's also that capability of using banners and maps too, right? Where you can you tag a banner with a map, and then it shows up on the map, and then you can kind of like put that banner wherever. It doesn't have to be on display. It could be like under your build, and it still kind of shows up where you want it to on a map. And that could be also folded into this kind of new system. So like you said, like you could geotag not every banner, but like if you wanted one of those specific banners on the map to just be on your locator bar, then you could use that instead of always having to pull up a map and again have something else on your your inventory to then find your way home.
Yeah, the text system in Minecraft also now allows you to print the image of a sprite, of like an item sprite in some situations. I'm not sure if that's like available to you in survival or if you need to run like commands for it or something, but it might be kind of fun to tag a map with icons instead of text. And then, have like, if you've got like a golden carrot over where your like food farms are or something like that, you could have like a neat way of tagging that stuff, and all you need is the banner icon next to it.
Next email comes from Samantha N, getting creative and building bigger. Dear Pix and Joel, Minecraft updates always pull me back into the game, but my old single-player world is feeling a little sparse. I'm all right at building farms, but I have something of a long-standing creative block. I get a bit overwhelmed when trying to build anything decorative larger than a chunk or so. What advice do you have for getting creative again and for going beyond my regular scale? Samantha got speared by a zombie on a Nautilus.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen sooner or later, so you better get used to that. I'm gonna start off relatively small with this because I know Joel will have a lot of advice about this with having finished the West Hill project recently, and you've got a lot of experience with like larger scale stuff. I think the main thing to remember is that decorative builds don't have to include just structure. They can also include infrastructure, and they can also include landscape. And if you're having difficulty building stuff that's larger than a chunk, it doesn't necessarily have to be a structure that's larger than a chunk. Think about pathways that connect different things around your area. These could even be pathways that are linking up the farms that you've already built. But then along that path, there can be landmarks, there can be structures, there could also just be like fields that you've curated a little bit. There can be hay carts that are transporting stuff from area to area, depending on the theme that you want to go with, whether it's medieval or whether it's more modern. You could think about vehicles and stuff like that. And little details like that along the way can be small bite-sized projects that can really help feel like an area is more lived in. The other thing I will say is that there's always an advantage to using stuff like reference material, but there's no shame in looking up build tutorials for stuff that's specifically from Minecraft, especially if you're not much of a builder yourself and you don't have like the spark of creativity that's going to get something going right away. I recommend folks like Mythical Sausage for some very well formatted build tutorials that are going to be like pretty straightforward. Will teach you a few techniques that you can then apply to building your own stuff later. And you could even pick a house design you like and experiment with changing a few elements. Like if you want to build the same house but alter the roof slightly, different materials, like a slightly different shape or something like that, you can mix and match elements like that, and that can allow you to fill out an area with houses that look stylistically similar, so it feels like there's a coherent theme going on, but are distinct enough that each feels like its own individual build. That's the approach I would take, at least to begin with. Once you're gaining confidence, you could branch out into other techniques and other ideas, but that's maybe a good place to start.
Especially if you're starting with existing builds. Like if you don't want to go off in a new area, I think, like you said, building paths or connecting the builds somehow and making the area of your existing builds feel like it makes a little bit more sense is a great way to start for sure. If you're looking at more of a empty space, like you've got builds on the server, but you don't want to start where you were, you want to start with something new, then I think figuring out a really broad general direction is a great place to start. Whether it's going to be a seaside town, a cozy cottage, spaceport, whatever it is, just get the broad stroke. And then go to some place like artstation.com or Pinterest and type in that, like spaceport or, cozy cottage, and just see what comes up. And then from there, you can maybe drill things down into like specific stuff, post-apocalyptic spaceport versus, utopia spaceport, like that kind of thing. And I find that if you stay away from, not to contradict Pix's advice about Minecraft tutorials, but when you're looking up references, if you at first stay away from looking up how to build a Minecraft spaceport and you just look at spaceport art or spaceport concept stuff, or even photos from films and comics and stuff like that, part of the thing that gets my creative juices flowing is actually problem solving. So you see this really cool shape and you're like, cool, how would I even do that in Minecraft? Even if I wanted to, like maybe I don't want to, but if I'm looking at it and I just say like, how would I even do that in Minecraft? And sometimes the decision is like, that looks like a pain in the butt in Minecraft. I'm not doing that. And then you go and find something else that you find will be more accessible to your experience, to your tastes, whatever that is. But I find that the problem solving aspect of that is usually something that will get me cooking. It'll get me thinking like, okay, wait a minute. Like if I can do this, then what are things about the game that I could exploit, that I could take advantage of, that would really work well with this particular style? And I'm dealing with this right now with the sci-fi zone, and that I'm not really sure what style of sci-fi I want to do. I don't know what scale I want to build at. I know I want to have some certain types of shapes. I want to try to avoid circles and curves as best I can because they are such a pain. So I'm going to try to have a lot of straight lines, I think. And again, that's also because I spent 5 years doing West Hill, and I want to kind of steer away from that kind of stuff and have a new start. And that said, when you have that idea, when you have the wharf in a seaside town, and you found something that's inspirational, fishing hut, whatever it is, just think about logistics. If you're having trouble creatively, just thinking about how do people get to the wharf? What other things are going to be at the wharf? Boats, probably fishing boats. Where do people keep the fish? How do they get to the fish building? Is there a road? What does a road to a fish building look like? So if you think about just the logistics, which is sort of what you were saying at the beginning, Pix, which was talking about like connecting buildings with roads and existing builds with roads, just thinking about things logistically keep you from having to come up with some grand idea about what's the world building and the lore. That's all creative thinking, which is great and can come later. I don't have any lore for West Hill. It's just a medieval town. Like there's a loose bit of fantasy for like potion shops, but that's it. And it's just function. Like I just wanted it to make sense when you're walking around. And that helped me immensely when I'm trying to figure out where I wanted buildings to be, how big I wanted them to be, how the roads were going to connect, all that kind of stuff. And so I feel like if you go into it thinking, what are the functions of this space, then that really helps with getting past the creative block, because then you're thinking more like an engineer than you are thinking like an architect, I guess.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make, bouncing off of that. The idea that if you're primarily concerned with resource farms, and that seems to be the area of Minecraft that you prefer, then sort of expanding that into the fictional realm and imagining like what would these folks need to transport that stuff around, thinking about it as a structural exercise like that, and thinking about it like an engineer is a very good way of putting it. We're going to move on to our third email this week. This is from Diamond Dom 2010, who wants to talk about the jousting experience. I see what you did there. Hey, Pix and Joel. As a combat-loving player, I'm very excited about the spear, especially the jousting mechanic. However, I won't really get much experience with jousting because I mostly play in single player. I really love the idea of having a zombie with a spear riding a zombie horse, but what if there were more mobs like this? What if Mojang added a new type of illager that wields a spear and spawned riding ravagers during raids? This would add a little extra challenge to raids and allow players to essentially joust even if they have no one to joust with. Do you have any ideas for how other mobs could potentially use spears? Chicken jockey jousting, perhaps? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks. Diamond Dom 2010 was stabbed by an illager with a spear, but lived until he fell on a dripstone spike in a cave. Double impaling.
I have this fear of dropping onto dripstone spikes in dripstone caves. I think it's in my Snapshot world where I'm over a giant dripstone cave instead of a lush cave. And because it's early game, because I don't have any elytras for soft landing, I was very, very cautious. And that caution, combined with my recent death on the Citadel, folded over into me mining out the geode. And every single time I jumped onto the geode, I felt like I was going to be stabbed by the amethyst crystals. When you can just walk through, them.
Yeah.
But they don't feel nice to jump on. Like you just kind of go, eat. But you're like, it's not, fine. Nothing happens. So I get the double impaling problem. Despite playing on a multiplayer server, I can't see myself getting much jousting experience either. One, it's just not for me. It's also a really quiet server and not really other people's jam either. I do like the idea of an illager mounted on a Ravager with a spear. I think it's a solid challenge for people that want it, especially because it's opt-in. Like you've got to start the raid in order to get it. So if you are someone that's not interested in it, or like you're thinking, woof, the last thing I want to do is deal with an illager on the back of a Ravager with a spear, you don't have to. So I like that idea. I would be even curious to see, because it does sound like that would be hard. I wonder what kind of spear that would be. Diamond spear? Netherite spear? Like what would be the reward for killing the illager on the back of a Ravager?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to imagine illagers having access to netherite. It sort of expands the lore in interesting ways. But they do have diamond hose in the woodland mansions, so they at least know what diamond is, and they have access to that. So yeah, I think that's a possibility, because I was thinking about it from a purely damage perspective. I see the fun of simulating jousting with a Ravager, but I get the sense the Ravager will probably deal damage more so than the Rider. Like Ravagers right now, when they attack, deal 4.5 hearts of damage on hard difficulty, and the Iron Spear only does 2 hearts of damage with the jab. I'm not certain exactly how the calculation of speed with the charge attack really affects things, but I would expect that the Ravager, purely because of the hitbox of it, would get to hit you before the Rider got to hit you, and that's the main thing I think that makes mounted combat on horses and other mobs like that more effective, is because they don't have a native attack, and they're also smaller, so you can get up closer to the target. So the Ravager idea is an interesting one, but potentially you're working against the notion of how Ravagers already act. You'd have to disable their attacking behavior so that the rider on the Ravager could get in a hit that arguably would do less damage. But I'm purely in favor of illagers doing less damage to me in general, I think. Yeah, as far as like other jousting opportunities, I like the chicken jockey idea. I think that's pretty fun. I wonder if maybe you could get something going with zombie piglins on striders, and because zombie piglins and piglins can also spawn with spears. So just natively in the game, it's going to take a little bit of number crunching, but the odds are you would eventually encounter a zombie piglin riding a strider. The added layer of difficulty to that is if you get your strider killed, you end up going in lava. Or if you're like, right, out there on the lava and you get dismounted, then you're going in the lava. Or if you get killed, all of your items are going in the lava. So there's an added sense of like, the winner takes it all in that situation. But I think that's a possibility for those of us that want a native jousting experience that's kind of already in the game.
Well, that's what I found that when I was watching some of the jousting footage from the Snapshot videos I was watching, is that it seems to be all or nothing. There doesn't seem to be like a 3 hits and you're dead, or like a situation where you lose the joust but you aren't a yard sale. Mm-hmm. And so jousting over lava seems odd. Also, striders are not fast. I was thinking like jousting on the back of a pig could be comical because they're so slow. Same thing with happy gas jousting, but that also has the problem of the Ravager, is that even though it doesn't have an attack, the hitbox on it is ginormous. Mm-hmm. And so you'd have a problem with that. Although you could have 4 players on the back of a happy gas and essentially do pincushion jousting, so like you could back into people, I guess.
The slowest possible jousting I can imagine. Just kind of slowly. You can see the lance coming for several minutes before it actually hits you.
There's is it an Austin Powers gag when someone's driving a steamroller
Yes.
towards somebody? Yeah,
And they
that
just don't get out of the way. Yeah.
don't get out of the way. Yeah, like that kind of stuff is a little bit odd. The chicken jockey thing I think would be overpowered. Like I already have a hard time hitting them. I don't need them to be able to charge me and do damage based on velocity. I think they're
Yeah.
pretty fast, and I think because of the way that the spear works, they would have to adjust it to not completely obliterate you, because if it's based on velocity, like they're already pretty fast, and I don't see them as being strong. I do think the idea is hilarious. I just don't see it working in the video game. So you heard it here first from Diamond Dom. In the Minecraft movie 2, chicken jockey jousting happening.
Yes, chicken jockey
Yeah.
with a spear, and
Yeah.
I can imagine the spear just being an effective weapon at keeping them at range. Because I think I mentioned when I was talking about them last week, the range that you get from a jab attack with a spear is
Right.
good enough at keeping baby zombies at bay that I can only imagine it being the weapon of choice against chicken jockeys.
Yeah. Our last email comes in from Bumblebee6612, new blocks, old builds. Dear Johnny and Joel, I was thinking about the new blocks and items in the Copper Age drop, and I wanted to ask you, how do you go about revamping your old builds with new blocks that come out every update? Or do you even go back at all? If not, why? Bumblebee6612 died of old age after revamping his old builds. I feel like you sort of asked and answered in your sign-off line. That's why I don't go back and update old builds, because they would never be done. I would never finish something if I constantly just went back and updated things to like, ooh, I like this block better. I would be forever working in Westhill. There would be no end to it in sight. And I think that removes the sense of accomplishment. I like being able to walk away from something that's finished. When I was working full-time as an illustrator, that's one of the challenges, especially with your own work. Client work, there's a deadline, so it has to be as good as you can get it by the time you have to hand it in. But when it's your own personal work, like you just have to walk away at some point and say, okay, maybe I'm not 100% happy with this, but the next time I do something like this, I'll know better and I'll do it differently. Or even if you like what you've done and you just want it to be a different color, build it again. Like do another windmill or another lighthouse with a different material in a different location. And all of a sudden you become like the lighthouse person in Minecraft. You know, like just there's things that you can do, I think, to not go back to revamp things constantly. That said, I have gone back and had to fix some things in the server that are no longer functioning. And sometimes it's been so long that it makes sense to build with new materials. So a really good example is the iron farm that stopped working because of the way that the mechanics were working in Minecraft. And we went back to fix it. And since it had been built, azalea had come out, moss had come out, copper had come out. So I made it look a lot more industrial, and I used a lot of the newer blocks because I hadn't been using them in Westhill. I thought it was going to be a fun kind of industrial looking build. So I did go back and revamp that, but there was a reason for it. It wasn't just because new blocks became available. It was because the farm essentially needed to be torn down and rebuilt. And so in doing so, I didn't really feel like building it out of spruce and green glass like I did in Minecraft 1.13. So it was worth it to upgrade the materials. And I think it helped me change the area. And when you do stuff like that, it does help make older areas of the server feel like they're more up to date. But I also like the snapshot of looking back and saying, oh, here's a bunch of builds that we did early on the server, and they look a certain way because you only had a certain amount of blocks available, or they're made out of concrete, or they're made out of a certain block that came out that was new at the time. And so it became the cool thing to build with. Like there's a lot of people building with copper right now. In 3 years, people will look back and go, oh yeah, that was when copper was the hot thing. And that's when the part of the server or part of your world is all copper, because like it was new and exciting and that's what you built with.
Yeah, you have a representation of sort of the heritage of your world at that point, and it feels like that kind of stuff needs to be preserved for posterity. Like, yeah, I've rarely encountered a situation where Mojang adds anything that makes me go back and revise builds, and I think it's mainly because if I'm building something, I'm building it with the block palette of the time, and I'm just picking whatever works for me. I'm rarely putting anything in as like a compromise and going, well, I really hope they add this kind of block later, because if they do, I can go back and swap that out for the, yellow terracotta that I'm using right now if they add a yellow block that I like better. I'm just getting builds to the point where I'm happy with them now and I can move on. I build them for the block palette that's available to me at the time. I consider them done, and then I don't feel the need to change anything. More often than not, because in the meantime, I've gotten used to the way they look, and then to change them with anything would, if anything, look kind of weird to me. So I just get used to the way that stuff looks. If I know an upcoming update is going to have exciting new blocks in it, I'm more likely to leave the build unfinished and then come back to it later. This happens to me more often than not with interiors, I think is the main thing. Because the exterior of a building, I usually want it to be done with the blocks that I've got available to me. I don't want to wait 2 months to finish off the roof of something or whatever. But with my factory build at spawn in this season of Survival Guide, I knew copper grates were going to be here in Tricky Trials, like a little while into having built that in 1.20 in Trails and Tales. So I waited for those to arrive before I did the interior, because then I thought, okay, copper grates are going to make a really good raised catwalk around the build, and I can work with those. And that's sort of the approach I took in that case. But if I like a build enough the first time, I usually like it enough to, if there are new blocks and I think, oh, that would be perfect for that build, I build it again. I don't go back and rebuild it or revise anything that I've done. I go, okay, I'll build that same house, but maybe rotated or in another place where it's not going to be so obviously compared to the first one. And then it feels like, again, an architectural style has developed in this area. If the fiction of the world is that there are people building these things, then maybe the same architect has designed another house but decided to work with new materials, and the roof is made out of, deep slate tiles this time instead of stone bricks or whatever it would happen to be. But in that case, it's the same house style, but not just a revision of the previous build. Because we have infinite space in this game, more or less. It's not exactly infinite, but it is. More than I think most people will ever cover in their lifetimes, even if you built in the same world for hundreds of years. So I think it really makes sense to use that space that we have, instead of just going back and working inside the same 4x4 chunk space and just rebuilding everything that's built inside of there. Going back to the exact wording of the email, stuff like the Copper Age with new blocks and items, it doesn't really have many new blocks in it. A lot of them are variants of existing blocks. Like, we now have copper chains to complement chains. We have copper bars to complement iron bars. We have aged lightning rods, where the full copper lightning rods were a thing before. So anywhere I could have used those in my builds, I've already got the previously available equivalent there. And I think the lightning rods, for one thing, are aging on their own now. So if I would have put an aged lightning rod there already is one. I just need to go back and tweak it to whatever age I'd prefer it to be. But I think it doesn't really change much about how I would build. I could maybe go back and swap out a couple of iron bars here and there, but those are more the decorative touches to a build rather than a big structural change to the build. And most of the time, if there are big new structural blocks added, they're not adding anything that wasn't in the game before, in the sense that there are still the same shapes of blocks. There's still the same block slabs and stairs and walls, and you probably got those available to you in a pre-existing material anyway. So that would be the thing that maybe would make me go back and consider revising a build, was that if something new was added to the block variety, there was something like a corner stair that was permanently a corner, so that you could change a couple of things about that and use that in odd and interesting places. But without there being new shapes added, I've found the block I want to use for that build already, so there's no real need to go back and revise things.
I think the shelves are probably a good example of that, right?
Yeah.
Providing that new vertical slab-like shape when you're not using it as a powered shelf, you're using it as a decoration in a build. And because they come in all the different wood types, like that means that there's likely a chance that you've used several of those wood types in different situations for different reasons, where a shelf could probably be put in there, where maybe you've got a trapdoor right now. I do the same thing with holding off, especially because we do the show and we hear about the stuff and get a good look at and are constantly talking about new blocks that are coming to the game but are not yet in the game.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of good examples are holding off on finishing the basement of the keep until Deep Slate was out, and also remembering that I didn't finish the throne room until the Pale Oak was out. And I don't know if I did that on purpose, or whether it was just luck that the Pale Oak just worked so well with the turquoise and the white that I decided to use for Westall colors. But it was definitely a decision that I held off on things. And I did that with the shelf. I haven't decorated the Shulker Shell farm on the Mushroom Island, specifically because I was waiting until I updated to 1.21.10 to have access to the shelf, because I want to put light blocks in the shelf and use that as like track lighting, like little, not LEDs, but like little light indicators along the farm to make it look more technical, and also cover up the scaffolding because I don't like it.
Yeah, and I think that's the great part about it, is like, it's not necessarily that you're leaving a build unfinished because you're waiting for a new block to arrive. It's that the new block that arrives is often the inspiration that helps you finish the build.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the way around I think about it. It's the same thing with like the copper grates in this factory, is that like, I know I want a more industrial aesthetic. Oh wait, that's coming along fairly soon. I can wait for that to show up, and then when it shows up, what does that inspire me to do? How am I going to finish this? I don't have like temporary stuff up there already. More often than not, I wait until the thing is available to me and I go, what can I do with this block? And I feel like that's just the approach I take across the board. So yeah, revisions rarely happen, I think, for either of us. I think most often we're just looking to the future of what we can build next, rather than thinking about what we have built and how it could have been better if it only just had this one different colored wood or something like that. Hopefully that answers your question, and that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about our show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud, as ever, to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging to join at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can chat it up with all the folks in there who are all massive Minecraft fans. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, and participate in our Hangouts, which we have monthly and quarterly, to let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft, and also so we can share some of the behind-the-scenes stuff about how the podcast ticks. We currently have 276 patrons, which is up one from last week, but there is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineers. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. You can find us on social media at the Spawn Chunks. We're available on Mondays on your favorite podcasting platforms, with video versions on YouTube and on Spotify. Email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is posted on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its third season. When I can, I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which is putting out a couple of bonus videos in between now and Season 11. We'll be starting that when the Hermits do in November. Aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. It's coming up on the end of October, so we're going to be recording a new episode soon. I recently watched the new How to Train Your Dragon live action version, and so I'll be talking about that with Steven on the show. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday, right now focusing very heavily on Minecraft, but we do have Lego squeaking in on Fridays, and there's a new set starting off this Friday, so tune in for that.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. So, dude, where's my horse?